Some Muslims, because of their own inability to interpret this verse in the context of the verse itself and in the context of other verses, have claimed that it has abrogated or superseded other verses of the Qur'an. There is nothing from the Prophet, peace be upon him, or the great Sahaba, his companions, to lead to the conclusion that this verse has abrogated verses such as in Quran chapter 2 verse 190, where it says you only fight those who have fought against you and you should not be aggressors, or Allah doesn't love the aggressor. That's very clear in these verses. So there is no evidence that this so-called verse of the sword has abrogated any other verse. It should be understood in its context, because it is in the same chapter, Surah At-Tawbah of the Qur'an, that Allah teaches that for those who have been aggressive and those you have therefore had to conquer, that you are to extract or impose the jizya, the tribute tax, for those who have been aggressive and you have conquered them. If this verse 5 is being interpreted as justifying forced conversion, that you fight people until they establish prayers, until they give zakat, in other words, until they become Muslims, then why would you be extracting jizya taxes from conquered people and still allowing them to practice their religion? It is when verses of the Quran are interpreted without respect to the context of those verses in particular, and particularly also in the context of the whole verse and message of the Quran, that misconceptions, misinterpretations are brought into the Quran. Verse 5 is simply saying, if somebody accepts Islam and is ready to become a Muslim, then you stop fighting. But that is not the only reason why you should stop fighting. You stop fighting, as the Quran also makes it clear, if they stop fighting. If they agree to surrender, you also stop fighting. And depending on the hostility and the relationship you had with non-Muslims, if they are to pay jizya, you will decide, because the Jews of Medina did not pay jizya. So jizya and the tax, the military exemption tax or the poll tax, which was usually less in value than the zakat which was paid by Muslims, was only paid by non-Muslims who were of the age of fighting but decided not to defend their societies. They wanted the Muslim army to defend their territories. Then such people were required to pay a contribution to the state. But that is when we come to discuss the subject matter of jizya. However, regarding the so-called verse of the sword, Quran chapter 9 verse 5, when read in its own context and in the context of the whole Quran, it is not teaching aggression. It is only permitting Muslims to fight those who have betrayed them, those who have broken their treaties, and also become hostile against Muslims. We find clear verses in the Quran, in the hadith, clear hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said, do not fight the Abyssinians unless they fight you. Do not engage the Turks in combat unless they engage you in fighting. The message of Islam from the Quran and from the Prophet, peace be upon him, has always been, you only fight those who fight against you when there is no alternative but fighting. If, however, you can forgive, if you can have peace treaties, if there's an alternative, then such alternatives should be pursued. But this verse is not abrogated by any other verse. It doesn't abrogate any verse. It should be studied in its context for a better understanding of how it does not contradict the peaceful teachings of Islam and the need to stand for justice against aggression, against treachery and oppression. And Allah knows best.